Hello. Hi,
Good
everyone.
morning.
Morning, Christian.
Good morning,
Uh,
Giorgio.
well, fourth episode of the Security Break podcast. We did it, apparently. That's a good thing. And for people who don't know yet, I'm Giorgio Berticone. I'm a threat detection and response consulting analyst at Vectra AI. Today with me, a new guest, Christian Tracci is here. Christian, do you want to have a little introduction of yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Hi, Giorgio. Thanks for the invite. Sure. So I work as a senior consultant at Wavestone, where I cover the public sector, international institutions on cybersecurity topics. Not focusing so much on detection and response, maybe more on the policy, strategy, and processes that go behind the big ecosystem of cybersecurity today. And maybe just to mention the side gig, we also invest a lot of time on Cyber Strategy Initiative, the Italian non-profit association that is working in this space to build a community of people interested in cybersecurity from different angles. That's my other side gig. Keeps
Great,
me
great.
busy.
And by the way, just to add on that, I always forget to say this, but in the description of the video that will be re-uploaded on YouTube, I will put Christian contact, so that if you are interested in any of his work or his project, you can just reach out to him. So yeah, for every episode you will find the contacts of the guest for that episode. So thank you very much, Christian, to be with me today. And again, the fact that you have completely different background and skills related to me, compared to me, it's actually, I think, an added value, because you will know a lot of things that I will not know about. And maybe that will be the same for the people that will watch us today. And by the way, hi, Zamroid, one of the first guests of the episode, is here with us today. Just seen his comment in the chat. Thank you. So cool. Basically, for the people who didn't watch the previous episodes, we just selected a list of cybersecurity news from the last week, and that we will have a really nice and relaxed chat about those, and try to understand opinions, or just what could be the um, consequences, or just interesting things about that fact. We have some of them today. I think pretty much all of them are very interesting. I just hope that we will not lose too much time, like talking about all of them. So we need to um, contain ourselves. Hi Rocco, that is also following us. Great. So what do you think, Christian? Are we good to go with the first one?
Let's get started. What happened this week, Giorgio?
So let's see. I don't know. People will think that I actually read this stuff. I don't know anything. So we will find out right now. Let's see. So
I know you selected some
here.
interesting news for your audience this week, and this is going to be an interesting conversation with lots of questions
Think
to
so. I hope so.
answer.
Yep. Yep.
And do we also get questions from the audience, Giorgio? How does it work? If they want to
Well,
contribute?
people can definitely use the tweet chat to ask any question, or also to give us their comments or their observation about the news we are reading, because maybe there's something that we both don't know about it, and they can actually add on top of it. So definitely that will be appreciated, and I will highlight that in the
Great.
in the screen as well, so we can both read the comments. So feel free, guys, to comment in the chat for any thoughts you have about the news. Cool.
Awesome.
So Yeah, the first news that people can see on the screen, hope so actually, is that yeah, apparently, Great Britain declared that they will double their, let's say, investment, their funds on, the, I would say, cybersecurity support they are giving to Ukraine for the, of course, the current, Ukraine Russia, let's say, war. Is that a war? Yeah, I think so. And that's kind of a big thing, because we also have some numbers in there that we will read it just in a second. And it says a lot on the attention that during a conflict like that, cybersecurity is actually a big thing, apparently, right? Because if I will say, like, a country has to spend all of that money just on this specific aspect of the war, because of course there are a lot of other things going on at the same time. Maybe some of them could be even more, I would say, heavy and I can say this, just difficult. Okay. But still seems that we are all putting some attention on the cybersecurity side. So, well, Christian, do you have any first thought about this? What do you think?
Oh, I have so many thoughts already.
That's good.
um,
That's good. We are
well,
listening.
you already brought up the question of the year, right? Which is related to the Ukraine, Russia-Ukraine war conflict, you want to call it. Is cyber a big thing? And that's a
Yeah.
question that everybody has been struggling and fighting about over the last year. There are all the different camps taking different positions. Some would say yes a lot, and they list you all the examples. Some they would say, if you want to take down Ukraine communications, you will still hit a power uh, plant, right?
Yeah.
So that's a question of the year. But this news, I think it's interesting because it shows how much cyber has become more than um, coding,
Well,
and it's really gone wide beyond the technical domain. And this is honestly like a pure news about international relations, right?
yeah.
We're
Yeah.
talking about a conflict first. That's a context where we're working on, and then we're talking about two or multiple countries at the very high level in terms of um, political and diplomatic um, spheres discussing and agreeing to uh, move a lot of money.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like it's pure international relations. If anybody's from this background, you would study how these things work, how countries literally use these relations and the financial aspect related to funding, donations, or support to build the relations between two nations and everything that comes with it. And I think, oh, this is very interesting. One, if you are from this sphere, one of the hot acronyms. This is a cyber is a field full of acronyms, so I feel
Absolutely.
free to drop mine already. But yeah, one of the hot acronyms that you'd study if you come from this background is DIME.
Okay. What's that?
DIME stands for diplomatic, information, military, and I think economic. And
Okay.
it's one of the acronyms in the sense that when you study how countries and nations operate in the international space, there are a number of ways to exercise your national power. And that's the acronym kind of breaks down the types of um, powers that you have or ways to represent and exercise your power. And this would be the perfect example, right? So you've got the D, the diplomatic, and you've got the E, with the economics. So if you put yourself in the shoes of like someone in a ministry, thinking about this, hopefully, uh, they
Mhm.
would be like, which way can we assert our national interest and play a role in the space? And they would, based on some analysis, hopefully they would choose one over the other, to play a role.
So
And yep,
just to be sure about that, the acronym you just mentioned is the what is this? The high
I
E.
M E.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes,
This is
yes.
very interesting. And by the way, I just wanted to remember people that I always forget about this as well, but I just dropped the link to the news in the chat so that, if you struggle for any reason, reading the news from the screen, or if you just want to, take your time after the live to have a read of the news, you can definitely do it. So that's what you can find in the chat. And for people watching this on YouTube, after live, I will also list all of the news in the description of the video, so always have a
Awesome.
look at that if you want. And I will just let you go because I think you had a lot of things to say, but I just want to say that I am actually loving what you're saying for a very specific reason. I'm a technical person mostly. Okay, yeah, maybe I'm a consultant. I deal with a lot of things, but mostly I'm a technical person. I'm coming from a technical background, and I think most of the people in this industry, right, comes from a technical background and also thinks that cybersecurity is all about technical stuff, right? That's like my perception of the industry perception, right? um, and that's so not true, right? Because there's a lot of things. Cybersecurity today is big, you know, that is also involved in conflicts of this level, because it's much more than technical stuff today, right? And we really need people like you, Christian, that also, I would say, put some awareness on these aspects. Okay, I also see this is just a side topic, right? I want to open and close it immediately, but
Yeah.
I also see a lot of people who are um, I will say attracted by this field. They are not in the field, they are not working in this field, but they like, reading about it. Maybe they think about joining this field, but they are just putting a barrier like in front of them, because I don't know anything, I don't know any coding, I don't know any technical stuff, so this is not for me. And well, there's a lot more that you can do. Okay, if you have any other interest, if you have any other backgrounds, right, legal stuff, politics stuff, and whatsoever, right, there's probably something for you as well, right?
I
So
could not
yeah.
agree more. Yes,
So
I
and
could
this
not
is
agree more.
coming from a definitely technical guy, right, with a very ignorant about all of these of the other topics. But this is the reason why I want to do this podcast, because I can learn so much from people
Yeah,
like you, Christian. So sorry for
totally,
the
totally.
interruption.
No, 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 no. Thanks for that. Actually, I could not agree more. It's definitely a field that has changed a lot over the last few years, and there's still different opinions, about this field, and some would be more narrow, um, old style, I would call them, and some would be broader and more innovative today. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Um, But let me
Yeah,
throw this back onto the
yeah. Sorry for that.
technical side. Let's go back to the technical side because you brought it up. So I think in this article there is something. There's a technical detail hidden, maybe a little bit, that is really interesting, which is Britain decided to donate some funding to Ukraine for what?
Mhm.
And that's a really key detail here. They specify that they're doing it for cyber defense. And
Yeah.
I think they also mentioned forensic. I don't know if you
So
can
they
control
mentioned two
F it.
different things that I'm trying to highlight here, but I'm sorry for that. I'm trying. Oops. So first thing is they are currently providing remote incident response support. Okay, that is very interesting also for me. So maybe later I will say
Hmm.
something about this.
Yeah.
And right now, the new fundings are in order to provision forensic capabilities. So still to analyze, the post mortem, of an attack. So what did it happen during an attack, and try to learn something, right, about it. So these are the two things that I think are mentioned in the article, right? And that, of course, Britain is specifically mentioning.
I mean, that's a key point there, right?
Yeah.
Because the second that something like this happens and you don't specify your involvement literally in a conflict territory,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you run the risk of getting drug into uh, the dynamics of what's going on in the Russian Ukraine war, right? So,
Sure.
and in terms of like broader terms of like political, legal, diplomatic um, aspects, once you say we're just gonna help Ukraine do whatever they want to do in the cyberspace, that basically makes you a party to the conflict, or it could, right?
So
So
this is
this specification is really interesting, and
okay.
it's not by chance.
Okay. So I have a question for you. Do you think this is also like this could be as a way to put some, I would say, limits or perimeter on what Britain is actually contributing for this conflict? Like these fundings are for this, part. We are helping with these aspects, and maybe nothing more. Maybe anything else will require another, public.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
If today or tomorrow Ukraine says, I would like to go on the offense,
Mm-hmm.
um, would the UK be involved in this? And based on this
Okay.
article, we would probably say no, right? And the key point here is the implication of that, right? So the key question is, when does when would the UK or any other country be considered a party to the conflict, right? And
Okay.
by the time you are a party to the conflict, that has a number of implications, which is Russia or any other party involved be allowed, or is it, can they legitimately target you, right? Because at the end of the day, I mean, I don't we probably don't think about this in these terms a lot in usually, but conflict is a highly rationalized phenomenon in a way, right? So
Yeah.
there are historically, because of history, literally, there are things that are allowed or are thought to be allowed, and things that are not, in a very like rationalized way, right? So as of today, the UK is not a legitimate target for Russia. Um, but if they became part of the conflict, maybe being directly involved, then
Actively
they could be.
involved, right?
Yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
they could be. And that's like it's been on the news before, right? With I think Russia definitely highlighted this. Um, in a couple of situations where the Western front was uh, showing greater involvement,
Yeah, the
they
support.
raised this and they raised the threat that they would consider them as
Mhm.
directly involved, right? And again, like if you go down the chain of implications, the next step is what happens if you are considered a party and then you're a legitimate target, and then the JCHQ gets start being heavily targeted by Russian attacks, right? So what happens at that point? How does the UK respond? What does that mean? What are the implications of that?
Yeah.
And that's really tricky, right? Because the escalation is in the conflict
Very.
studies, the escalation is the most difficult, most challenging thing to manage, right? You, because you want to, again, rationalizing this, you want to de-escalate
Yeah.
or manage the situation.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
there was a lot of course, speaking about the conflict, right, in general, and again, from an ignorant perspective, what I feel is that, of course, all the potentially involved countries do not want to escalate this to a potential world war, right?
right,
Because
right.
there are so many potential, other countries that are supporting or not supporting in different ways, and that's what all want to avoid, right? I think also from the Russian side, maybe they do not say it publicly, but of course it's a different thing to have a conflict with a single country and have a conflict to many other parties. But I don't want to specifically talk about that just because I think it's too broad as a topic.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
wanted to mention it because I want to contextualize what we are talking about, and let's maybe return a little back to the cybersecurity side, right? Because we we contextualize, right? We said what is the context right here. I think people at this point understood that this is quite a, as you said, a difficult and tricky topic, and a part of this, I don't know how big, but definitely a good part of this is cybersecurity, right? Because we didn't see, I will say, in the previous conflicts we've seen before, any public statements like this, any specific fundings, focused on such stuff. This
yeah.
is what it will be eventually the most interesting thing for maybe people watching this podcast, maybe, right?
Yeah, we've seen the cyber dimension has taken a role definitely in this conflict, with other parties being involved. The U.S. As well. I think they were involved in some sort of support like this.
Mm.
I think they were also on the news for something similar a couple of weeks ago. Um, but this is literally, to go back to where we started. This is literally institutionalizing an action, right? A
Yeah,
state decision to establish a recurrent or persistent relation with another country. So it's a lot more than just a side operation, side
yeah.
activity.
Like we
But
will.
to yeah,
Okay. Well, I was
the
just
cyber
asking.
question, yeah, the
Sorry.
cyber question here is, does it play a role? Does it actually change the outcome? I think that's a hot question
Oh,
on this news. Like, okay, Britain, the UK, or whoever else decides to do this, does that play a role, or is it just politics?
well, well, that's a difficult question for me, for sure. But I want to try to give some inputs, right? Um, so for what I read in the past about, again, the cybersecurity side on this conflict, it was really clear that Russia was a lot focusing on that for the offensive part, right? They were attacking both physically and on the cyberspace to really put pressure on Russia on Ukraine from the very beginning, right? And also, Ukraine said multiple times that they needed support on these aspects as well, and they did. Again, this is a broader topic, but they did on both, um, I would say, official requests to other supported countries, but also from privates. Right? They had
Hmm.
really a sort of a private army of just normal people, civilian people that wanted to support Ukraine, both Ukraine people and from abroad. So the reason there was a lot of cyber conflicts, right? And I definitely think that Ukraine need that support, especially on incident response, like
Yeah.
what is mentioned in the article. Because the point is, uh, they said multiple times they are not on the offensive part in this conflict, right?
Hmm.
They are, let's say, um, the victim here. They are, let's say, just responding to this threat from
Yeah.
Russia. They are just defending themselves from the, I will say, the overall narrative here, and automatically that's going to be true also from the cyberspace, right? They want to defend themselves
Yeah.
from the cyber attacks from Russia, and because I don't think they add any, or much inner capabilities on that, in this aspect. Of course, funds and direct involvement from other countries that are much more developed in this kind of activities, I think will make a difference. I don't know if that's gonna change the outcome of the conflict entirely. That's maybe a question that I'm gonna ask to you, but definitely, I don't think Ukraine will say no. We don't need this. Let's put these funds on something else, right?
Well, so to break down what you were saying, I think we agree that the need to do more, have more support, and everything was is there. Like
Yeah.
nobody would dispute that. And then the question is, how do you tackle this need, right? And
Mm.
I don't know. Like let me ask you as a specialist in response, right? In incident response. If I drop, uh, how many is it? 20 million on you as
Yeah.
Giorgio's land, is that really gonna help the whole nation to be better protected
Okay.
from a nation state attacked? And because the other side of this is, would something else be better, right? I don't
Mm.
know. A vendor offering, as we've seen it, a vendor offering EDR and a bunch of other services for free. Like, would that be
Hmm.
better than having some experts, government experts, doing capacity building and knowledge sharing, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe that's fancy and it's really good for very targeted, specific situations, but then at the broader nation state level, it doesn't really change much. Or the other alternative is, does it make it worse? There's also that option, right? If I'm going down the extreme perspective here, but let's assume that this news were taken really badly by the other side, and it was taken just as a way to increase their
Yeah.
targeting,
The
right?
offense.
That's yeah, exactly. That's the worst case scenario. I don't think that's what's going to happen or it's happening here, but it's definitely something to think about. As you were saying, like the choices, resources are limited, time and resources are limited. We need to figure out how to maximize them, right? And in any space, whether it's like cyber, should you focus more on which side of the fence, right? And or on the political side like this. But I guess maybe the final question on this that I want to throw at you is, if you put yourself in the shoes of a nation state, UK in
Hmm.
this case, should you do this? Should we do this? And why?
Okay. Okay.
That's a tough one, right?
There's a lot on on this thing, but that it's definitely interesting. Thank you very much for on this input. So, well, I have two premises here, right? First of all, these we don't know the details here. We know about the amount of money, right? But we don't know exactly how these are going to be spent, or
Mhm.
if there are any constraints from Britain on how to spend this, because I think there will be, right? They say, this is for forensics and incident response, but what does that mean? Is this money that Britain should pay their own operators, right, to just contribute to the Ukraine cause, or this is just money that they are giving to Ukraine, and you can spend this on incident response services from other people. I don't know, like
Right.
I don't know the details here, but this is the first premises. The other thing is that, of course, I'm gonna be biased in this thing, right? Because of course I think incident response is important and everything. So take is as what it is. Okay, so just the perspective from someone in this specific field. So the point is that what I think is we are on a late stage, I would say, of the conflict, right? We cannot really talk about prevention
Hmm.
for what I think, because it's too late. And by the way, even if it wasn't that late, you can in cyber in general, you cannot focus only on prevention, because you can never say, okay, I'm 100% secure because I can prevent anything. Okay, there will be always something that it is unexpected, and eventually, if you are targeted, like in this case, of course, um, someone is gonna breach your defenses, breach your
Yeah.
preventive measures. So definitely there should be, and it's a good thing that there are investments in response. So basically, for people who don't know what we are talking about, we are talking about the fact that, okay, an attacker, or in this case a country, a state, is attacking you on the cyberspace, and they already have breached you. But the point is that you can still try to contain the damages. You can still try to understand how they got in, so that you can, patch, the way they got into your network, so that you can basically kick them out of your network, right?
Hmm.
And and make sure that the next time your preventing measure will be higher, and you can defend from the same attack, right? So this is the process we are talking about. And during a conflict of this level, that's definitely something that I think uh, countries, organizations, institutions should focus on, right? Because it's going to be during a war, let's say a generic war, maybe not this specific one, but there will be a lot of attacks. There are on the physical perspective, there will be on the cyber perspective, and both sides of the conflict will maybe perpetrate attacks. So each of the sides should be able to detect those attacks, to know they are in fact hit by something, because the problem with the cyberspace is that you can maybe be hit, and for some of those attacks, maybe you don't even know that you were. Like, maybe let's talk about espionage. That is something that during war, I believe, is going to be done a lot, right? Espionage is something that where you attack, you breach um, the target defenses, and you try just to uh, take data from them, maybe to have um, I would say an help on the physical part, right? If you know where the army of the other side is placed physically, you will have some um, uh, just some help on the physical side, right? And you have to understand that you were hit on the cyberspace in order to prevent that data, that information to be stolen, right? And of
Right.
course, if you are actually hit on a let's say critical infrastructure, right? Something that we did see a lot for this conflict. Maybe again, a power plant is attacked on the cyberspace, so that the country does not have the power that is needed, right, during a conflict like this, and you want to understand where they got in, so you can kick them out and restore your power capabilities. Okay, if the attacker are still there, they can still mess up, even if you try to restore just physically, right? They are still there, so you maybe switch it on. I'm simplifying here, right? You switch it on the power, and they are still there that switch it off. So it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense if you don't respond to the cyber threat.
Yeah.
So again, from my perspective, this is definitely something that is going to be useful if the money is going to be spent well, of course. And just the last thing that you mentioned before, comparing this with just vendors providing, hardware, software solutions or something. Of course, those are helpful as well. But if you don't have people, if you don't have um, experts operating even those solutions, those are not useful at all. We are not on the stage like globally where you can just put technology in there, and that's true for any, um, I would say, scenario, right? You cannot just put technology in there and you can say, okay, I'm safe. That's not true. Whoever said that, that's not true. It's a combination. Software and tools and technology helps a lot. Actually, I would say it is also required because on the other side, they are using tools, technology to attack as well. So you need that, but you definitely need expertise, you need skills, you need the people capable of using those tools and eventually analyzing, in this case, the data that comes from that technology. Okay, so the whatever solution you are providing, that is useful, but someone should read the data from that tool. Okay, and that person needs the skills, needs the background, needs the expertise, and that person eventually is going to be paid for it. So that's where I think at least part of the money should be spent. I don't know if overall it makes sense. That there's a lot to say, but
For the
yeah,
record, I
just my
totally agree with you. I was just being thought provoking with trying to break down the different sides of this.
yeah,
But
that was great.
maybe
That was
then shout out to the blue teams then. They play a key role in this, huh?
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I will say thanks for the, again, not just for this conflict, of course, for this conflict, but in general, people putting efforts in the defending organization in institution and um, investigating those threats. I think I'm biased again, but I think that's a really essential part of the uh, you know or just the cyber game, right? Without it, mm,
For sure. For sure.
yeah. So it was great, and I think we could talk a lot more about this, even more than what I was thinking, when we selected this news.
Yep.
But I think we also have a lot of other news
Let
to talk
let's
about.
see the others.
Okay, okay, great. So I hope this was interesting for everyone, but we're going to switch to the next one. And I'm gonna, just to not forget it again, I'm gonna drop it again in the chat, the link, I mean, for this news, so anyone can read it. And here we go. Of course, another yeah, big piece of news here. I think all of the news we collected this week are pretty big actually, but we'll try to again contain ourselves. So this one, as you can read from the screen, talks again, of course, about ChatGPT. And the point is that apparently some researchers, academic researchers, studied and also, um, how can I say this? They concluded, right, testing ChatGPT capabilities, that when you use it to create code, so to program something, scripts or software in general, uh, apparently is not going to create that code in a very secure way. Okay, and this is just the title. I think it says a lot. So very little premises here. For the very few who don't know we are talking about when we say ChatGPT, we are talking about, and sorry for the machine learning experts out there, I'm not an expert, I'm just giving a very a high level definition, is a artificial intelligence model. Specifically, I believe it's a LLM, so a large language model, uh, that is currently pretty public, so anyone can technically access to it and use it with a series of consequences. And one of the capabilities that this model has, you can ask it whatever you want. It can basically answer pretty much any question in plant, in plain English or any other language. But something that a lot of people are using it to do is actually to ask ChatGPT to actually build software. Okay, so to code a part of an entire product. I'm not, I don't know about the entire product, but at least piece of it, um, entirely on its own. Okay, so you just tell him the task. Okay, I want to create this. You just tell him the constraints. So I want to do this in this programming language. I want to do this respecting these limits, or to achieve the specific goal, and so on and so forth. And you basically have I mean, seconds, like the code you need, right? So, and that's what this news is talking about: the fact that you will have the code eventually, you will have the output you were expecting, but as programmers that and developers that are watching this will know, probably, or should know, is that you can definitely create some piece of code in multiple different ways, and all of these different alternatives will probably work. Okay, they will actually do what you expect them to do, but you should also care about the security of how you are coding it. Like, is this code also providing some some of my colleagues will say, hidden features, right? So basically bugs or unexpected ways to exploit the code, right? Maybe to do something um, harmful for the code, the product itself. Well, it seems that ChatGPT is not really caring a lot about it, or at least that's what the researchers say. I don't know. This was the introduction. Christian, do you have any thoughts about this?
First of all, I think this is interesting because of the massive applicability first, and then potentially implications. I don't know if the implications are massive yet, but potentially they could be, right? So that's why I think it's relevant to talk about this. And well, the first reaction I had when you started presenting this was, well, we started off with the good news, and now this is probably on the other side, on the bad news of the week, right? So let's balance a little bit, but I guess it's part of our job, so that's good. The key concept I think here is, I started off with an acronym now, and before, and now I'm gonna drop the buzzword of the day. I think it's security by design, right?
Mm,
That's the buzzword of the last couple of years, definitely more, but it's gotten a lot more credit recently. And this is the massive example.
yeah.
We are talking about generating code that is unsecure by design. Um, so that's interesting. But the first question I had when you were presenting this was, is this is a problem today, but
Hmm.
is it actually a problem long term, or in 3, 4, 5 years? Or is it something that we can easily tackle and solve with a more tailored um, model trained on secure coding, and with a very specific goal of writing secure code? Like, is
Hmm.
this a problem we can easily solve? And I don't know. I'm asking you or anybody
Yeah.
who's connected and knows more about LLMs or machine learning.
So, very interesting inputs again. Thank you. And I think I will split these into different topics, right? Because I think there are two macro, I would say, interpretations of this, and we need. I think that to actually answer your questions, we need to go through both of them, right? So, if we so you asked basically, if this is just something that is happening right now, or this is impacting long term, right?
Yep.
So first aspect is, okay, this is an issue for ChatGPT itself. Okay, so the researchers have had an assessment of this specific tool, right? So we are talking about one specific model, but when we talk about artificial intelligence, there are a lot of other models out there. I know Bard from Google, and probably there are a
Mhm.
lot of others that I don't know because I'm not in the field. So this is just a piece of it. What if the same assessment was going to be done on all of the other similar tools? Maybe they share the same issues. Maybe other have already found some ways to improve this, because of course it's not something that you just fix. You can again just increase and set the bar higher so the code is a little more secure. You are taking into consideration also these aspects, right? um, and about this, I think we don't know, and there, like, we will need a much broader assessment to have an answer to that question, right? We need to
Mhm.
assess all of the tools involved. So let's say that OpenAI is behind ChatGPT, right? Reads about this news, and from now on, they put some effort, some investments on increasing how ChatGPT is focusing on security when building code.
Mhm.
Technically, I think, and again, we will need maybe some thoughts from an expert, but I think this can definitely be improved. Also, because I somewhere in the news, it's pretty long, so I'm not going to find it, but somewhere in the news they say that if they ask ChatGPT to evaluate its own code from a security perspective, ChatGPT knows, let's say, or at least mention that no, the code is not secure, or it can be definitely be improved on a security perspective, right? So if
Mhm.
there's that kind of let's say awareness, I'm a little afraid about using these words because we are still talking about a tool, right? But still, if technically uh, the learning process of the LLM included security on coding security, I would say, uh, definitely there's some work that can also embed those same concepts when building the code itself.
Right.
Okay, so I think that could be improved, and on long term it could be a lower, I would say, issue. There will always be a risk, as there will be always be a risk when a human creates code, because of course even the most expert person again cannot be 100% secure that, okay, my code is unbreakable, my code is perfect and cannot be improved more than this. That's not true. There will be always something that I think can be improved. uh, yeah, and that's the first part. The other aspect is that uh, today, and I'm pretty sure about this for, I would say, personal discussion with some friends and folks, but also from some literature out there. As we said, ChatGPT is public. Anyone can use it, and a lot of people is using it, also for their own daily jobs. Maybe also with their um, employers not knowing about this. What do I mean? I mean that if I am an employer and I hire a developer, and that developer starts building its code um, in combination with ChatGPT, like asking also ChatGPT to create some pieces of that code that is gonna integrate with the overall project that is working on for the company. It means that today, globally, a lot of companies don't know that part of their, you know, uh, code repositories are actually built by ChatGPT. And my question now is, like, something that we probably will not know the answer, but my question is, how many companies are there are building products with unsecure code from ChatGPT? That's already there. Even if ChatGPT will improve, and the next code that it will build, it will be better on the security perspective. The code that was already integrated in a product from I don't know, uh, company X, I don't know, that's already there. The bug is already there. There could be a vulnerability, and maybe we will never know because the developer will never declare, "Oh, I did this together with ChatGPT." Does it make sense?
So I think there's no question that that is a problem. My question would be, why do you think that's a different problem than just a human writing unsecure code? Because that still happen. It's not like today doesn't happen and then with ChatGPT would happen, right?
For me,
One
it
answer
is.
could be
Yeah.
it's the quantity or the quality of that code is just so different, and that makes it qualitatively different. It's a different type of problem, right? So that could be an answer, but I don't know. Like, why do you think? Do you think that would be a completely different type of problem than what we have today?
So, for multiple reasons. First of all, um, like the point is, how many developers is ChatGPT actually enabling to build that
Mhm.
software? Like some of a part of that software is something that maybe the developer would have never built without ChatGPT because they don't want to. They think it's too much effort. They think they don't have the skill to do it. Right? But today there's ChatGPT, so I will do anything. So I will write actually more code than yesterday.
Mhm.
Okay, um,
That
just
sounds
because
good.
I'm enabled to do it. Right?
Yeah.
So it's let's say the example in my head is that from the day ChatGPT was released and was declared to be able to build software, it's like the developers out there in the world just duplicated. It just if
Mhm.
from a day to the other we have double the amount of developers out there. Of course, this is just in theory and well, let's say philosophically, because a lot of developers maybe don't use it. A lot of developers are capable of finding that vulnerability on the code. So maybe if they take the input from ChatGPT, they also modify it to make it more secure, and so on and so forth. But technically we can have a lot of more code because of ChatGPT. Okay, so
Right.
that's one reason why it is different. Okay, and maybe a developer today was building insecure code in X amount. Today is building software unsecure code on X plus ChatGPT, right?
Right.
So it's a quantity thing, and the other point is about, I think, laziness. So what about, we are humans, right? We are all humans. We say that already. We are all imperfect, and the point is that if something else is building the software or on my behalf, okay, am I really checking it very carefully every time ChatGPT writes something? Or today, because I'm a little ill, or today, because I'm a little lazy, or I'm focusing on another task that is
Yeah.
most important, I just ask ChatGPT to do it and I copy and paste it without checking it. Again, not because I'm doing this on purpose, but because I have other problems, other
Right.
things that my manager is asking me to do, right? So again,
Right.
I think that ChatGPT is just multiplying the problem.
Okay. That makes sense. Um, Based on your initial the introduction, can he also be the solution?
Oh, okay. uh, yeah, that's interesting, but also difficult, I would say.
Not today, like we said, not today. Maybe,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
maybe if, and like I think sometimes we forget that ChatGPT is a general AI model,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not tailored. It's not specific to a specific field. It's supposed to be able to answer questions from any given number of uh, topics, right? And coding being just one of them. But if it were just a software development AI
Tool.
model,
Yeah.
would that make it better? And maybe I know people talk a lot about this. It's not my field. There are other solutions that might be better today. So maybe that's a solution today
Yeah,
to
yeah.
not use.
Yeah, yeah. So again, you I think you introduced multiple things here. So again, we said already that technically ChatGPT or another model that is um, more capable on this aspect, right? More capable of creating secure software can be used, and maybe tomorrow we will just balance what we did in the past, right? Just because we will start to build much more secure software tomorrow, it's okay, the amount of code that we put in there today is not a real issue, on a global aspect. The other thing is what you mentioned before, like what if the new coding capable chat GPT will be actually um, the cure for this issue. Well, there's a little but very important implication on that, right? Because today, what most of developers do is to create new code, right?
Mhm.
I have to create a new feature, a new um, uh, arm of the product, okay? And I start building it together with ChatGPT. But in order for a model like this to make the previous code more secure is to make it capable of reviewing the previous code. Okay,
Right.
so it means that you have to take your internal repository, and maybe you are a company with a very big repository that can contain a lot of data, and that data is not going to be only code. It could be anything like I don't know, databases, or even hard code credentials, or we can talk about this for months maybe. Um,
Mhm.
and you have to put all of this on the ends, like virtual ends of an artificial intelligence model in order to review it and make it more secure. That's something that already some tools are doing, right? It's called, I think, code review. There are
Yeah.
people doing this, and there are tools doing this, where you just um, input your code and make it suggest some changes to make it more secure.
Right.
So it's already a thing, and I think it could probably be integrated with artificial intelligence to make it even more capable, right?
Well, you brought up the problem of the um, training data set of AI models, which applies to this specific case, but probably we all heard about it in the news for other more um, clickbaiting
Yeah,
reasons, right? So if you feed any model, if you train any model with biased data, it could be discriminatory, whatever other strong position that we find in the information that is available online or whatever else is your source, then the model that comes out might be biased, right? Unless you put in place corrective measures, right? And I think the same problem exists here, right? If we take all the code that is on GitHub and that code is not good because there have been vulnerabilities in all that code, then the outcome, unless you put in corrective measures, might be biased. So that's a general problem of AI, you know.
well, like there are two different things. The like what I was suggesting before is not really to um like provide the code to the model in order to learn from it,
Hmm.
but to review it, right? So let's say that um, you actually stop the learning process,
Yeah.
okay? or at least you can, again, I'm not an expert, but you can like do the learning process on a laboratory internally, and then whatever the actual user are giving as an input is not learned anymore. It's just processed for the purpose of the outcome, but maybe it's not going to change the model itself. Technically you can do
Right.
this.
Right.
It's not how it works today,
Right.
but
Right. Right.
technically
Got it.
yes.
Yes.
But still there's an issue that is, are you still giving ChatGPT or whatever access to your person, like to your private data, or to your, I would say, there's a better term for this, but I don't remember, um, like sensitive data for the company. Like
Hmm.
I don't see, I don't know, AWS giving their infrastructure code to ChatGPT to make it review, because still the infrastructure behind ChatGPT has to be secure in order to not exfiltrate the data, to not expose the data. I don't know if that makes sense. There are other implications about this, because you are still giving access to your data to external providers, to external
Right.
tools that need to access a lot of data in order to do a proper job. Otherwise it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
With ChatGPT today, yes.
Yeah, of course.
Unless you develop your own internal model, then that's another question. I-
Yeah, yeah.
Last thought I have on this. I thought this news was also interesting because it kind of replicates a problem that we have in the security space, regardless of AI, which is how each professional coming from different backgrounds comes to this work with their own mindset. So if you are a software development, your core mission is to develop codes and you focus on that, and sometimes you might or might not think about security. If you are, and this is an example, but you also got the completely different example. If you do offensive, you are really focused on, I'm going to oversimplify, breaking in, and sometimes you might not pay as enough attention to operational security, right? And that's how we've been seeing so many cases of how offensive groups then actually got breached because they were not following the best practices, right? So in terms of like mindset, security, for me, security is really about mindset of like applying some fundamental concepts to whatever you're doing, right? And that's why we have security professionals that focus on that, because like whatever else, I wasn't saying that in a negative way, whatever else you're working on, that's your core mission, and it's good that you're focusing primarily on that. But then today it's become so evident that there are other aspects, security aspects in this case, that are so important that you cannot just ignore them, right? Otherwise then there are consequences, like you were saying. But so just to bring it back to ChatGPT, like if you tell ChatGPT how is code supposed to be secure, and then you ask to improve code to make it secure, apparently it is possible to do it. Whereas if you don't take the security perspective in your prompt or conversation with
Yeah, yeah,
ChatGPT,
yeah.
then it's not considered, right? Because it's a different mindset for the AI model.
You're so right. And again, I think you already had an input on this before. So the point is that should be in the mind of the developer, or prompt engineer. I've seen this term used
A
already.
lot, yes.
Like, uh, should be the person building the prompt to think about, okay, I'm not just going to ask to do this, but also to make it secure. Or should ChatGPT consider it like to make it secure by design? Because again, it's something that all of the all
Right.
of the world should focus on. So there will probably be a lot of conversation about this, because
Yes.
is it like, OpenAI fault that build a software that doesn't take this as a prerequisite. Okay, like again, code should be secure by design. Like there are a lot of things that they did for not answering um, problematic questions. So what if you ask ChatGPT how to create a weapon or something, right? It will actually say, okay, I know how to do this, but I cannot say to you because of the consequences. Okay.
Right.
So technically could be the same. Should ChatGPT reply to, okay, I cannot give you this piece of code because this will be unsecure by design, and I can
Yeah.
just give, proper developed code. Okay, that's I think is the missing part. Still, of course, also from the other side, I will say because I'm biased and I'm a security professional that all of the developers out there should know and should care about the security inside their code. So maybe they should create the prompt by design to ask for security. So I don't know. Should be if we talk about something stuff that should be, both things should be. But I think there will be more and more like pressure on OpenAI and similar organizations to actually solve the problems from their side. So you don't have to care about it. You just make me a sandwich, make me automatically a secure sandwich. I don't know if that makes sense, right?
I absolutely love this point. As I was reading the article, it was literally like the cool question. I was asking myself, who's responsible for this, and
Yeah.
who's responsible for the solution? And I totally agree with you. Like in the long term, it should be secure by design, and it should not even be a question. It should be pre hard coded into
Hmm.
the model. Um,
Like
so
I would
yeah,
like
no,
to
yeah.
I want to close this with a question because I don't think that there will be an answer, right? Because you said who's going to be responsible for this, and I'm gonna ask when there will be like a data breach caused by a vulnerability in a code built by ChatGPT, who is going to be accountable for it?
Oof.
Right?
I mean,
So
so sorry, this is such an interesting question. I don't want to drop it like that. I think
I knew it.
today it's a really good question. I think it will come up and it will be broken down in a way that is harder to answer. But today, I think we still have a fairly easy answer because we're still attributing responsibility to humans. And maybe the parallel example here would be with code that is just reused, right? If you take code from
Yeah,
Stack Overflow or whatever, and you reuse it, or if it's maybe a better example, if you take open source code and you rebrand it and you resell it, are you responsible for it if that code was unsecure, right? And that's a hot question that we're actually tackling and struggling a little bit today to make mostly to make it operationalized, right? Not to figure out the responsibility, but to say you are, like you were saying, the keyword maybe is accountable to fix that or pay for that.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. It's a tough topic, right? And I knew that this could be another podcast just focused on
Right.
that.
Yes.
So again, I'm saying that it was very interesting, and we are taking much more time than than I
Yes.
was
Let's move
expecting.
on. We got a lot to cover.
But I'm loving it, right? So thank you very much,
Yes.
Christian, and I hope that you will have time this morning because we still have some news to talk about. So we have to reach to the end. And I hope that people are still, following us because maybe we are deeping dive a little bit, but I think it's much more interesting. So
It
thank you
is. It
again.
is. Yes.
So I just dropped the banner here. So again, we are live on Twitch right now. We are talking about this, but this video will be re-uploaded on YouTube later next week, and also on podcast platforms such as Spotify. So if you're not following us today, feel free to I'll do the cool guys say subscribe. Do they
Subscribe,
yes?
yes.
Do they subscribe to?
Subscribe and follow us.
Yeah. So
Subscribe and
anyway,
follow us.
great.
What's
Let let
next?
let's move forward. This is again, I would say something that will really probably interest you because it's still on your overall background or field of interest, right? And so let's introduce it, right? So the Department of Justice, I just processed the acronym because I didn't know what DOJ really meant, but the Department of Justice from the United States did a really interesting like uh, you know declaration publication, I don't know, where they are introducing a new section of their national security division, right, that is very very specific about, and I'm just quoting the article here, prosecuting malicious foreign cybersecurity acts, right, or events. Okay, so I need personally to process this a little more. So a division that is specifically focusing on foreign, okay, so involving foreign countries, cybersecurity events. Okay, um, so I think again I'm immigrant, right? But I think this is big, and as usual, United States are always a little, not always, but often a step in front of most of other countries, right? They had considered in the past maybe cyber, like the cyber realm as one of the um, realm involved in a conflict like a war, right? So they were the first doing something like this, and this is another clue that they are really taking attention on the cyber realm, putting an entire division working on just cyber events involving other countries, right? And this is, I think, again, in order to address conflicts with other countries or avoid further conflicts, I would say, or try to also, I think, um, prevent escalations, right? Because again, if you are finding about something that potential harming countries doing, targeting you, you want to point it out, that we know about this stuff, we know what you are doing, and they can also maybe try to do something as a consequence, right? So this means, creating a division means putting people and skills on this stuff, means putting investments on this stuff, and again is another clue that we will probably have a lot of work to do in the following years, because we are here to stay, right?
Definitely
So
not going
again,
anywhere.
I will actually give you, the uh the, I can say this, the
I I am so glad you selected this news. It's one of my favorite topics probably, and it's not even something I covered in my previous studies necessarily or at work really, but I just found it when I was going through, school and um, looking at cyber from different angles and this would come up. I just always found it super interesting how, again, to start off, how cyber is connected to other fields, and this would be the legal space or law enforcement. And then the I think the news here is not even about the legal aspect. It's,
mm,
let me throw on the table something else that is barely talked about, but I think it will be super relevant and interesting in the future, which is, here we're talking about literally organization.
mm,
Like, how do we figure out what's the right approach in terms of configuration, organization at the uh, business, institutional, team level, um, to tackle and to fix the problem we're facing. So let me break that down. We have a
So
problem.
let me
Everybody recognize that.
sorry. Let me just interrupt you
Yes.
for a second, just to maybe explain me and the other people
Yes.
some little more, right? Because it's not really clear from an ignorant perspective what the article is really saying about this division. And what I mean is that
Good
is
point.
this legal division? Is this an investigative division, or is this something like just a diplomatic thing? So, do you know, and maybe you're not, but do you know a little more about what could be the real scope of this? Maybe there are multiples. I don't know.
You're super. Yes. Sorry, I jumped a few steps that were clear in my mind, and that's a very good question. So let's go back. If we go back 10 or 15 years, even
Hmm.
more. You go back all the way to cuckoos and
Hmm.
cuckoo's eggs and the beginning of this. The history of cyber, literally, as we read it today, is we had cases, we had attacks or incidents, whatever you want to call them. People detect them, and they were trying to do the analysis or forensics, if you want to call it that way, and then they were trying to report these things, right? If you take Kuko's hacks, they would go to the local FBI division, and the FBI or any other law enforcement agency, probably around the world, you could report an incident that happened to you personally. It could be small, it could be big, and they would literally struggle to even know how to address this, right? They didn't have the skills. It was not the priority. They didn't have the resources, probably. So this was a big, big, big problem for many years. And over time, and we're literally talking about decades, because we're talking about like a gigantic machine that you have to change with training resources and all of that. First, it was recognized as a problem, and then they started taking some actions to say, okay, if you are a police officer, if you are an FBI agent, you need to have some basic trainings on how to deal with evidence, right? So that if you come into a crime scene, you don't just uh, disconnect maybe a running machine with some memory that you actually want to save,
Thank you
or
for
things like
mentioning
that.
that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah, no, but it was a hot topic, and I think a lot has been now written on all the sides of this, from like the very start of this process, literally how you deal with evidence. There are some like good guides around right now by multiple organizations, how you share that information, and how do you treat it throughout the whole process. And then, so that's maybe the left side of boom. No, it's actually right side of boom because the incident already happened. But the where the news comes in is, okay, we collected all the evidence, we have to prosecute it, right?
Mm.
That's where the attorneys and yeah, the prosecution comes in, and they also had to had some good understanding of the cyber domain, right? And that
Of
was
course.
not given for granted. Like you talk to anybody coming out of law school, it's not a mandatory class to take digital forensics, right?
If it is a class
It's
at all.
it's a hot topic. I think any and every country right now is doing a lot more. Or we've got divisions under all the law enforcements, whether it's Italy, the US, or anybody else. But then I think what they're trying to address here is within the prosecution divisions, you needed people who were hyper specialized first, and that's one problem. The second problem was that prosecution works by jurisdiction, right?
Mm,
That's just the
okay.
nature of how things are, right? If a crime happens in London, in Paris, or um, Switzerland, it will be prosecuted by that department, right? And in the US, they had this problem where um, maybe a company was spread out over different states, US states, or different regions, and it was super hard for the different offices to coordinate and to put together that information and realize that the same malicious actor or IP or whatever level you want to analyze was behind this. So I think they did a lot of work already in trying to streamline these processes. And now they just literally created a division focusing on this. And I think there is a really, really awesome book on this. I think it's called The Dawn of the Code War, Code Conflict, something like that, by a US, I think, Attorney General who was working on this, and it literally shows all the cases, and it focuses a lot on China and
Mm.
how the Chinese threat actors were targeting different companies in the states with the same techniques, right? But every attorney, every prosecution had to go through the same investigation, which was really difficult, right?
From
But they were not
scratch,
sharing information.
repeating steps
Yes,
that someone else already did
yes,
maybe in the past, right?
yes, yes. So and now I think they're really trying to tackle this from, again, an organizational standpoint. So here
Mm.
we've got so many layers of this problem. You've got like the technical forensic, that's like the first one, right?
Hmm.
Then you've got the legal aspect, and honestly, this news is not even talking about laws. They're not changing any laws, right?
Yeah.
The laws are already there. I mean, there's a whole conversation about laws, but not on this one. And then this is literally like, how do we optimize the setup to tackle this problem? And let me give you different examples, because this is a macro example and it could feel a little bit remote to most people who are not spending their days thinking about how to optimize institutional offices to win the cyber war. But if you take a very micro level that could be more relevant for everyday cyber professionals, how do you set up your team to make sure it's efficient and the analysis is doing works to achieve whatever objective you have, whether it's coming out with a really good CTI report where you need to communicate between different CSERTs or different SOCs, whatever you're dealing with, or if you are literally like an analyst, how do you make sure that my IOCs are shared with another analyst sitting in the building next to me, right?
Yeah.
Or how do you make sure, and going down even to the more concrete level, how do I make sure that my own analysis of those IOCs is effective and efficient? So, for example, that I don't jump to conclusions because my attention was grabbed by something else, right? And I think this is a whole debate or discussion that is not paid a lot of attention yet because we have a lot of other problems, but it will come up. How do we optimize this? Because at the end of the day, it plays a big role. Uh, Getting rid of these, let's call them inefficiencies or
Mhm.
barriers, really can hinder our ability to then succeed and solve an investigation or figure out who's behind an attack or whatnot.
And let me try to put an input in there. So, am I correct if I say that this is also a lot about priorities? Like, what I'm thinking about is that, this division is very specifically focusing not only on cybersecurity, that, a lot of what you said before, it's about cybersecurity in general, right? Maybe in the last decades we didn't have any focus at all, right? We didn't have any skill at all on the legal side, and so on and so forth. I mean, but in this case we are even on a deeper level, where we are focusing not only on cybersecurity, but those cybersecurity topics involving foreign countries, for the United States in this case. So for me, it's also a way to make a priority to investigate and to prosecute those I would say attacks, but in general, cyber implication involving foreign countries, because
Super true. Yes.
like you have
Please.
internal
Sorry. Go
versus
on.
external things, and creating a division for external things, I think it says a lot about putting a priority on those external things, right? Am I wrong? What do you think?
Super true. You just brought up two very good points. First one is this is a lot what's happening here with DOJ is a lot about um, prioritizing
Mm,
um, professionals' work and attention, so that if you are a prosecutor, you can only focus on cyber-related crimes, and you're not juggling between a billion different topics that could come your way. And I think that's really important, because at the end of the day you'll do a probably better job if you have the ability, the mental freedom, and the specialization to just focus on that. And then the second point is actually probably more important, which is you do need some level of understanding and knowledge of the context, right? In cyber in general, in international investigations like this, if you don't understand, for example, who are the threat actors, and you've only ever dealt with, I don't know, uh, very local based phishing scams and frauds like that, then once you have a very sophisticated threat actor targeting something that you cannot even imagine could be of interest, then your ability to go look and solve that investigation might be um, limited, right? So in this specific case, like if we take the example of the book I was mentioning, I think one of the points that was highlighted was we need to understand not just cyber, not just how a cyber attack might work. We need to understand China. We need to understand how the threat actors are looking at us, why, for what reasons, and what is the broader uh, strategic uh, goal that they have here, right? Why do they want to steal very specific um, trade secrets that
mm,
sometimes back in the days were not even relevant to other people, right? Um, so it's interesting because this new division is under the national security, so it definitely has a foreign focus. And I think they mentioned that it will not substitute the internal criminal division that focuses on more
mhm,
national level regular crime that is investigated. Yes, exactly, right there. So this one, the new one,
yeah,
has a very specific focus, like you were saying, on foreign um, initiatives. And maybe the last point to add there is it's interesting to see how certain investigations and certain law enforcement work like this one becomes so much linked to the diplomatic aspect, right? So
mhm,
if you're a nation state, if you're a country, do you decide to prosecute, to go after whatever foreign state might be behind? If it's an individual, it's a lot easier, right? You
yeah,
are based in whatever country that is hosting you, and I want to sue you, and I go after you, and maybe I can reach you somehow. But if you are a nation state, then becomes like a much bigger question, and it if we want to actually, you know what, at the beginning I cheated a little bit, because the first acronym I gave you as a second component, um, it's dime fill, but I always forget the
okay.
second part.
Shame
So
on you.
it was,
Shame on you, Christian.
yes, diplomatic, information, military, economic, financial, intelligence, and law enforcement, right?
Okay.
So those are the seven ways of manifest or use powers
Mhm,
for a state, and law enforcement is one of them, right? So
sure.
if you look at this problems from the very, let's say, high level strategic position of someone sitting in the prime minister or president's office, and they come to you with these questions. You're like, how do we, okay, a nation state hit one of our companies, how do we respond? It's so big that we need to respond. How do we respond? Do we want to prosecute them? Do we go after North Korea with a lawsuit, or do we go after them with economic sanctions? Do we go after them with um, diplomatic initiatives like we saw before? Like any of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is the hot question on this topic, which is highly debated, is does prosecution work in this space?
Sure, sure,
And there is no good answer, I think, in the field, in the literature. It's highly disputed. Some people would say yes, you should do it. You should sue, try to sue North Korean actors, and some people say you're wasting your time.
sure. So I will say that sounds a bit philosophical, but all good questions doesn't have a clear answer, right? But because I think it's a good question, right? You are in that field, and again, as I said before, unfortunately, multiple technical people do not think that policies in general or governance is a really um, useful thing at all, which I don't think it is. I think that I started, like, I had the opportunity to work in this field because of GDPR, so it definitely had an impact, right? So it definitely was useful, and it is. But going back to the article, I actually have another question for you. So I'm
Shoot.
so this is difficult. So what I understand, right, is that this is about law enforcement, right? So about
Mhm.
specifically, I wanted to try to explain myself, enforcing laws. So there are already laws in place, maybe to regulate, um, even cyber threats between countries in the United States. But you need a way to try to enforce those laws whenever someone actually breaks them, because countries break them, right?
Yeah.
So you need a way to enforce them, and for that reason you need a division to focus on that. And when I read the article here, like I was doing before, there are some examples on what the Department of Justice was doing before to that um, make it clear the focus on this stuff. Something like U.S. international authorities, I'm quoting, announced that they had completed an operation to disrupt a sophisticated malware implant used by Russian hackers. Another thing here is Department of Justice and FBI announced they had dismantled the infrastructure of the Hive ransomware group. So what I'm reading here, and well, this will
Mhm.
take a lot probably, but what I'm reading here is that the focus here is the offensive. And when I say offensive, maybe I'm not only relating to cybersecurity attacks, because maybe, I don't know, technically that could be another way to put a consequence, right? If one of the consequences you said could be military, so technically it could be also responding to a threat with physical damage. It could be technically also cyber damage. Like it is not maybe
Mhm.
happening right now, maybe, yes, we don't know. And but maybe it could be like that in the future. So now this was just the introduction to my question. Do you think this new division could potentially actually like support, um what do they call that? I'm not remembering the term, but
Hackback.
yeah, hackback, right? So responding to a country attacking on the cyber field with a new and another attack, like in this case, this, like with the aim of disrupting the offense from the other side. So I don't know,
So
what
yeah,
do you think
no.
about this?
Um, I smile because I've seen that um, interpretation of this news on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
and um, at least from the source we're looking at, I could not take that conclusion.
Yeah, sure, sure. This
So
is not what the
the
news is saying, right? It's my, let's say, elaboration, right,
yeah,
on this
um,
thing. But we don't have any I will say basis to
yeah.
conclude this. Just some thought.
But my understanding, and again, it would be interesting to hear from someone who actually worked on this, because I've not. It's
Hmm.
just my own interest on the topic. But my understanding is that DOJ and the division under DOJ would be in charge of the criminal investigation, right? So
Yeah,
it to get to your example, they would probably be in charge of making that call to decide to what extent we can respond. But then
yeah,
whoever implements that would be the FBI. If it's criminal, would be the FBI in this case, as it's
I see.
mentioned.
I see.
And that's for the criminal uh, side of thing. So
Hmm.
if we are talking about nation against nation, that I think would be a different case. But
Absolutely.
here
Yeah.
we're talking about, let's say, a threat actor based in country X that decides to target our um, very critical infrastructure,
Hmm.
and we want to prosecute them. Um, but the implementation of whatever decision is made, and there have been a lot of cases where companies brought these cases to the district attorneys, or the district attorney took initiative, and then DOJ made that decision and allowed either the FBI or Microsoft itself. There are a couple of cases to take action and take down um, um, infrastructure that was used by the threat actors, right? So that would be the
Yeah.
example. I don't think that DOJ will have the mandate or resources to do that themselves,
I
and
see.
I don't think they should. um,
Okay. No, no, no. That's interesting. Like, um, I see it, potentially involved in a scenario like that, probably. But as you said, maybe that will like involve other like parts of the overall organization as well, because it's definitely possibly the highest level of you know uh, issue they could face, right? Um, so maybe that requires like involvement of other parties, right?
Maybe it's, I mean, this is easier to answer if we bring it back to the physical space.
Yeah.
um, you commit whatever crime you are
Hmm.
responsible for from your house, and
Hmm.
an attorney brings charges against you. They would go to a judge, and the judge would eventually take a decision, and maybe at some point a decision could be to seize your assets, right? Because
Sure.
you started your crime from your house. And in that case, it would not be the judge or the attorney, the prosecutor, to seize your assets. It would be enforced by law
Sure.
enforcement, FBI, or whatever other agency as jurisdiction.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that would be
absolutely.
the breakdown in the physical
But
space.
the decision to seize your assets are coming from potentially the discussion between attorneys and judges, and right? That's what I
Yes.
meant, right? Of course, you will have I don't know what security agency perpetrating the potential hackback, but the um the okay to do that will potentially come from discussion coming from this new division. That's what I
100%.
okay.
100%. That's this is actually a very interesting point. I think we often forget the broader context in which we operate in the Western world and in some of our countries, where we're talking about a state of law where
Mhm.
law dictates your actions, and especially when we're talking about criminal cases or institutions involved, these are highly defined processes, right? So you don't just take down the C2 of whatever entity on your own.
Sure.
Because you think that's the right move. You would need to get that approved throughout the chain, whether it's civil or military as well. Military would have just their own chain,
Yeah.
but it's highly, highly institutionalized and formalized in a way. Um, and so again, this is a super interesting conversation to have someone with someone from the field, because they really talk, if you ever do, they really tell you more about all the steps that they have to take to motivate that. And it's
Mm.
really not that easy, apart from like extreme cases where authority could be more lax or delegated. But
Mhm.
usually it's like, if you are literally, if we bring this to us, if Georgia is I don't know, DDoSing me and I want to take you down, like I don't just do it like this, right? I have to
Which for the
demonstrate.
record, I'm not.
You don't.
Not at the
um,
moment, at least.
there are a lot of steps to prove and get approval.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's definitely, well, super interesting, and again, I think it's very useful, also as one of the purpose for this format, right? Because again, I'm taking back the technical versus policies people, right? And a lot of the technical guys I've seen talking about hackback, right? Like it is a simple thing, especially when we talk about countries. But you helped us understand, like me included, that there's a lot more going on behind a potential decision where a country is going to hack back another country, or just potentially a civil thing. And so it's really challenging and complex topic. It's not something,
Right.
it's not only controversial, because maybe it could be controversial on a ethical
Right.
like perspective, right? Maybe most of the time that's the center, the core of the discussion around hackback. But it's also like a really complex politic thing. Okay.
Yep.
um so yeah, I just want to just close the discussion here. That was already, again, very, very, very interesting, because the timing is time is
Yes.
running really. And I'm actually doing a little change on the original plan, so we are going to jump directly on the final news, Christian. um and the point is that I think there's a a lot more to discuss about the last thing as well, right?
Yes. Let's do
So
it.
yeah, let's just directly jump to the final thing, okay? And as usual, this, like the last one, is the news that like created the title for this episode. So the title is "Did Apple Intervene in Russia Attack?" And the reason behind this title is the news that we're talking about here from the Washington Post. Just a very brief introduction, but I think again we will really spread from the different and various, um, I would say, things behind this, because it's also like a chain of events that started, I think, like a month ago, or some weeks ago. But the news from the last week is basically that Apple, depending on where are you based, um, just fixed, I think, a couple of vulnerabilities in their iPhone devices. So basically, 0-day vulnerabilities, from what I understand. And this is not something new, right? Of course, iPhones are maybe, I would say, the most targeted devices when it comes to specifically to espionage, because it is a device known to be maybe much secure than other similar devices. So important people of any kind, right? From the um, investigative journalists to politicians, they most of the time have this kind of devices. So that also means that vulnerabilities for these devices are very, very important and very much like valued on economic perspective, because I like to remember there's a market for vulnerabilities, right? So vulnerabilities are being um, sold on the market, and the most valuable, the more organizations pay for those vulnerabilities. So the iPhones, I believe, are totally the most valued vulnerability out there. And so that's the reason why this is not a new thing. We've seen a lot of zero-day vulnerabilities used in different kind of attacks in the past. And of course, Apple is actually very, I would say, good and pretty rapid to fix those issues. But what makes this news even more interesting, because it's usually already interesting to on its own, is that these vulnerabilities appear to have been used in the last week in I would say in an espionage based attack against um, Russian folks. So it's not really known exactly what was the target. We just know that the like the Russian government declared that they were facing, a lot of Russian folks who were, both Russian folks and Russian people based on other countries as well, where we're going to be facing this kind of attack on exploiting iPhones. And at the same time, we know that Kaspersky, so a very well-known Russian cybersecurity firm, was declaring something similar. So there were two different declarations. I can say a better word, where both the government and Kaspersky on the other hand were saying, okay, someone is exploiting our own iPhone devices to exfiltrate data, to spy on us, to I don't remember if this is specifically mentioned in this article of other articles that I actually read about this, but they were talking about emails to be exfiltrated and the other information in the iPhone themselves. Um, and the point is that at the time, you can see here Russia Federal Security Service, or FSB, were basically accusing Apple itself and the U.S. government also of being behind this attack. Okay, so they were actually accusing Apple to collaborate with the government to perpetrate this attack. So this was the accusation from from the Russian government, not actually from Kaspersky itself. I believe Kaspersky was just declaring, there is this vulnerability. It's actually their job to find about this kind of also international attacks. This time, where this was um, involving them specifically, but it's actually their job to analyze these things and provide information to their clients also about this kind of threats. But there was a very big accusation there. Now, a few weeks later, Apple actually published the fixes for those vulnerabilities, and this is so in some way putting them in a I would say in a difficult position, right? They were first accused to be um, like the behind the attack itself in some way, and now they're providing the defense from this attack. Oh, here's their shield. Like from now on, if you use this fix for me, you will not have any problem anymore. Okay, so they are in some way moving out from the accusation. Right, I was not involved in this. Okay, I'm actually providing the way to fix the problem. Okay, so now this is the kind of uh, difficult conversation that it rises from this chain of events, right? um, yeah, this is pretty much the basic news, and this is what happened.
Where do we start? Did you download
I
the
really
update?
don't know. I really don't know.
Did you download the update? The
Well,
patch?
like for for OPSEC, I should not say what kind of device I use, so I'm not
Good
going to
point.
answer that question.
Good point. Um, well, let's start from the basics, maybe. So here we're talking about it's 0 day,
Hmm.
highly sophisticated 0 day, also called zero click, right? So it's a very specific type of vulnerability. I think most of the audience who follows us um, is familiar with
Well,
the.
you're actually right, and I think still I'm going to say a few words about it, right? So
Yes,
we
please.
mentioned,
I was gonna ask you.
yeah, no, that's good. Like we mentioned 0 day vulnerability, but what does that mean? Um, like the 0 day term is used whenever a vulnerability that was not known before the exploitation itself, okay, is found out by someone. Okay, so whenever Kaspersky in this case declares, okay, there has been an attack, okay, with these characteristics, and the root cause, like the actual I should say the attack vector, so like the way the attackers got in the device, okay, was the exploitation of some vulnerabilities that before this actual analysis were not known at all. Okay, so someone is exploiting vulnerability that before the exploitation itself was not really globally known, because of course someone knew about it. If they exploited, they knew about it, but it could be that the same attackers, like the perpetrators of the attack, were the same people who um, found out about the vulnerability, and they didn't declare this nor to Apple itself nor to anyone else, and they just used it. Or like very commonly, what did happen is that someone found out about the vulnerability, doesn't say this to anyone because it's a big one, and actually sell it, as we said before, to the market, to the basically who pays more for it,
Right.
and who buy the vulnerability then uses it, or again sell it again or whatever, in order to make the attack possible in the end. Okay, so this is what usually happens. We don't know what happened here, and probably we'll never know, but this is what usually happens. This is when you call it a vulnerability, any kind of vulnerability, a 0 day. So 0 day means the first day before the actually um, publication of this vulnerability,
Right.
and it's exploiting. So this should make sense, I think.
But then you also need to explain to us zero click, because this is
Oh, right.
a specific kind of 0 day, right? It's a
Sure.
zero click.
Yeah, that's true. And again, if we add the term 0 click to this vulnerability, I think the price for this vulnerability rise to, I don't know how many, uh
Millions.
yeah, how many millions probably, right? At least, I think the minimum will be 1 million for just the vulnerability, and then you need to build the exploit, and then you need to perpetrate the attack, whatever. That's another topic, but the point is that that's very, very interesting. The two vulnerabilities, or at least one of them, I'm not sure if that is specified in the news anyway, were 0 click vulnerabilities. So they were both 0 day, so used before the publication, and 0 click. And that means that basically, in order to exploit the vulnerability itself, okay, uh, like the attacker doesn't need any interaction from the target user at all. So basically, there are a lot of vulnerabilities where, like, I send you an email and I need you to at least click on a link or download an attachment or do something, right? And after you do that's something that I'm requesting you or pushing you to do, okay, I then exploited the vulnerability and maybe I got into your network, okay. So it needs most of the time at least a little step of interaction by the target user. Now we call zero click vulnerabilities when we don't need any interaction. So basically, I think that these vulnerabilities were affecting, iMessage. So I think it's the SMS basic app for iPhones or something. It's basically a chat a chat thing, and you send like the attacker send that message like containing the payload containing like exploiting the vulnerability, and just the fact that you receive that message without you reading the message, without you clicking on it, without you doing anything, the vulnerability is already exploited and you already are sharing your data to the attackers. Okay, so both 0 day and 0 click. 0 click meaning you don't need to do actually anything in order to be attacked. You just they got in without any issues. I would say. Does it make sense to you?
Yes.
Was it a good one?
Thanks for the explanations for the audience, I guess. So, I, let's start from two concepts here. I think two areas, two topics I want to talk about. The first one is, as you mentioned, the whole conversation about vulnerabilities, and the second one is about security in the sense of whether you want to call it operational security or your own cybersecurity. Right? Let me start from the second one. We Anybody who works in the space grows up pretty much since the very first class you take on cyber with the notion that there is no um, zero risk or risk zero, right? So the declination of that concept is that uh, if a highly sophisticated threat actor is targeting whatever target you potentially uh, over time in a highly complex system, there is in theory no way for you to protect yourself, right?
Exactly.
Because by the nature of how information technology works in a systemic way, there will always be components talking to each other, and there will at some point be a vulnerability. And to translate that in more concrete terms, the takeaway is if you are being targeted by someone with a lot of resources, there's almost nothing you can do to protect yourself.
Yeah.
So that's the extreme oversimplified maybe takeaway, but I think it's really interesting here to see that there are things you could have done, and I think they do mention the lockdown mode that now Apple has launched a few months ago to
Yeah.
that would have been preventing the attack. And that's really good, right? So you cannot protect yourself always and forever, but there are measures that you can take to minimize your risks and
Yeah.
to minimize the likelihood of an attacker's success. So you can, to make it simple, you can make it more difficult for someone attacking you, and you should take all measures within your risk tolerance, if we want to
Yeah.
use some
Yeah. Yeah.
buzzwords, to do that. But it's interesting, like at some point a single individual cannot win against a really big machine. Like the catchphrase that's sometimes used, I think at a conference this was popular. It's like, how can I protect myself from a government, right?
Yeah.
If Georgia's land is has decided to really invest resources on me, there is no way that I can do to protect myself, and that's why we do need to build something bigger. We need to build an ecosystem where multiple actors, multiple layers. You need to do in-depth defense and all the concepts we like to talk about to increase this likelihood of succeeding in the defense. But otherwise, it's something really complicated, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's probably the biggest challenge
yeah,
we actually have in this industry, right? We said multiple times in this episode that there's no way you can be completely secure. Like
right,
there will always be like um, a hole that you are not considering that attackers can exploit, and
right.
that this is the perfect um, uh, you know I would say clue that
Yeah,
this can happen, right?
right,
Let's say the context is one of the biggest and maybe most advanced security firm out there, so they know their stuff, probably. Right, they know how to
of
secure themselves. Maybe that's also the reason why they were using that specific device, because we said already that technically, if you compare the different, mobile devices out there, iPhones are one of the most secure for maybe multiple reasons. But again, doesn't mean that if you own an iPhone, you are immune from any
right,
kind of cyber attack, and nor you are with any other devices. There could be probably like a niche, or say devices like that are more secure, that are specifically developed for that stuff. But again, also those one will eventually have some vulnerability, especially if the people owning those devices are highly target ones,
right,
right? If you are, like, again, a politician or someone who does have very important information that you know state sponsored groups will actually target, they will find a way. They will
right,
invest a lot of efforts and money and work on actually finding a way, and eventually they will find it. So the only way is usually, if we move this discussion a little more on the technical aspects, is to put in place usually multiple layers, right, of security. Okay, I do own the more secure device out there, but at the same time I do not connect to any uh, you know uh, un- like untrustworthy networks, and at the same time I just power it on when I strictly need it. For the rest of the time, it's in a safe somewhere, I don't know.
yeah,
So as you said, really depends on your um, like the threats that you are going to face. Like,
yep,
who you are, your work, the data you are handling, and on based on that, you should find out, okay, because I own this data, because who I am, and the actors to which I'm interacting to, these are the threats I could face potentially. And based on the criticality of those threats, I should work on my security, um, like as a consequence. Okay, so if I could potentially have multiple state-sponsored groups targeting me, maybe I should not use technology at all. I don't know. Again, there's no real answer to
yep,
that. The only, how do they say it, the only secure computer is shut down and put
right,
like underground or something. But at the same time, they will find a way to physically steal the data from
right.
you, right? That maybe it's even worse. I'm not sure what to prefer. um,
It's
so
it's a really fascinating concept. Yeah,
yeah, it's from the very low level kind of philosophical aspects of security.
yep,
And probably everyone should know about this. Like, if you're, let's say, security professional, of course, in general, and again, if you could be some kind of target. There are a lot of people
yep,
out there that always say, okay, I don't have anything to hide. That's the very common phrase, and okay, probably most of those people should not really prepare for a 0 click 0 day attack. That's potentially true. That's not always true. I have a few examples in my head that I don't want to say because we have not that much time. uh, but if again, if you could be targeted at that point, you just should do whatever you are capable to do. Okay.
Uh, s- let me pick on this last point you made. This is actually very interesting because sometimes we talk about cyber or security or these problems in a little bit of a oversimplified way, right? It's either protect yourself, like that's a messaging we do. You need to protect yourself, right? And then we
Mhm.
don't really break that down in like we are trying to do right now in terms of where, when, and how you should protect yourself, right? If I go to my uncle and I tell them you should use lockdown mode to protect yourself from a 0 day 0 click, they're going to be like, what the hell? At first, and second, they're probably not going to do it because it's not as relevant for them. um, and yeah, so that doesn't really apply, right? So the messaging should be, you need to have a baseline of cyber hygiene that it's applicable for everybody to increase indeed the difficulty for any threat actor. And then if you are very based on your threat model and risk assessment, in very specific cases you need to take different actions to make it more difficult. But the different messaging, I think, is interesting. We don't do that as much, I would say.
Yeah, again, there are multiple problems at multiple levels here. Like, of course, it will be really nice to have like a baseline for everyone. Okay, to raise the bar, to increase difficulty for um, you know uh, attackers to reach their goal. But the point is that, like, the real problems, I think, come when you are on the very top level, and your threat model, the risk you are facing are very, very high, right?
Hmm.
So for that reason, you don't really just a baseline. You need extreme, right? I
Sure.
will definitely say extreme measures. Okay. And again, as I said before, with extreme I mean maybe you should consider to use multiple devices for multiple purposes. Okay, maybe you have an iPhone, but at the same time the most important data are not on that iPhone. Maybe you just use I don't know, like maybe a laptop with a lot of measures on top of it. I'm not sure. Or at least have, again, even multiple mobile devices for that, with one of those using it just when you really need it for very important communication and so on and so forth. So that's the problem, right? When you are handling maybe top secret data or
Hmm.
very harmful data because you are protecting someone, and the consequence to know those information is that someone can be actually threatened and actually harmed, right? uh, so that comes the real difficulty. It's on a micro situation
Yeah.
versus a macro situation. We all would like in this industry that anyone will increase their security posture. But when you are on top of the pyramid, you need really
Right.
extreme measures, and still that cannot be enough in some cases. Even the feature that you were mentioning before, the lockdown mode, right? What if, and maybe I'm actually understanding that this is not enabled by default, right?
No.
So again, we can come back to the discussion we are having for the previous news. Should be actually Apple making this by default? Is it like a responsibility from Apple because they are selling these devices to make it as much secure as possible by default or by design, or should be you, right? Like reading about this stuff because maybe you didn't know about it. What if the feature is there but you don't know about the feature and it's not enabled about the like by default? Maybe you should pay like a consultant or someone to teach you and configure your devices, but at the same time, if you are at that level of risk, should give you sorry, should you give your own devices to someone else, whoever he is, right? I'm not
Right.
sure. I will not trust any consultant probably to put hands on my device with top secret data on it,
Yeah,
right?
it's it, the fascinating thing here is that it really shows how complex the problem is. It's not a line of code.
No.
It's it's a billion pieces coming together, um, and that's what creates the vulnerabilities. I don't even mean it in terms of software vulnerabilities, literally like the systemic, like the real vulnerabilities, the holes in the system, right? That are then exploited. Whether it should be lockdown mode by default, no, because this brings up another key point in our field, which is the tension between security and usability or efficiency or whatever other goal you have to achieve, you want to achieve with technology. Lockdown mode basically makes your phone um, almost unusable for the billion features that Apple is famous for, right? So that's again a very targeted use case, like you were saying, and it really again another buzzword of this decade is risk based. So you do need a baseline, whether you are in this field or you are uh, the uncle working on agriculture. Um, and then above that, and the baseline should go keep going up, right? And I don't think we talk enough a lot about that. We don't question passwords anymore. I don't think any sane person would say passwords are too much. But then there are other things that I believe should be in the baseline, and they're not, and they're still questioned. So that should be raised. But then everything above it, because it's so specific, it should be based on your risk, like you were saying. Um, but if we want to see the, I think, positive side of this story for the defense, again, because here we're just talking about the defense of the news, um, I think it's interesting to see that defense or the multi-layered approach you were mentioning in a way it worked, right? Because um, Kaspersky was doing network monitoring, and eventually they caught this, right? So if this were Giorgio own device and maybe not set up in the same way that a major corporation is doing security, not monitoring all your network flows, you might have never caught this. If we want to take away something positive from the story, like we should keep doing that. We should keep
Yeah.
layering up and do defense in many different ways to diversify the risks and increase our probability of catching incidents.
Well, there's actually a little more about that. Like what I was referring to was like putting in place multiple layers of defense to prevent an attack, right? And we already said that the more layers you put in place, the the more difficult will be for the attackers to reach their goals. But still, there will be that 0.1% of chance that they can be in. And what you mentioned is that you should put another layer that is not actually like prevention but detection. And here it comes again, my field. So of course, it's very, that's even more difficult when we are talking about individuals,
Hmm.
because there are ways to put a detection structure on an organization. But when you are like a single individual, and your infrastructure to defend is your uh, I will say, some people call it like a PAN, personal area network, right? Basically, your network is your mobile device, your laptop, your maybe smartwatch
Yeah.
or whatever, what you are wearing and putting, like taking with you. Okay, it's a little more difficult. You don't have like a company behind. Maybe, okay, maybe some politician could have something like that. Maybe a government could have something like that. But to monitor, mobile devices of people that are traveling for work, are always, everywhere and anywhere, monitoring like network traffic. That's that's
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a challenge for me, that I'm exactly on that field, right?
It's really complicated stuff. And to go back to that, I really struggle with this because in a way, in the messaging and narrative, we are sometimes we assume that the single individual, the private citizen, is even capable. Not even that he doesn't want to do it, but like we're assuming that you're capable. Not even so, even someone who works in this space, right? It's not a given that Giorgio has its own network detection with your firewall scanning and your CM setup and all that shit to catch something like this. That's a big assumption, and I don't think even like at a uh, national or society level we should even expect that. Like
Yeah.
we need you are a citizen for a reason, and you don't provide your own physical security. There's police on the street, right? And the same way you should expect whether it's a private company like Apple or whoever else, or a government, to at least play part of that game, because you cannot succeed. Like you were saying, it's too much.
And actually, I think the last um, aspect of this discussion that I want to discuss together with you is that, in some way, uh, we said that you don't have like a team most of the time behind you with all of the technology, all the infrastructure they need to defend and prevent and detect and whatsoever. The only layer most of the time that you have, in order to defend you, is the vendor itself of the device,
Yeah.
right? So you are choosing the device, and basically choosing the device, if you are on that, top of the pyramid that we were talking about before. In some way, you are also deciding what's the level of security by design, but also the of response, right? This is some kind of response. They are pushing some um,
Right.
fixes right after the breach. Without the fix, you should trash that device at all, right?
Right.
So that's in some way a level of response. And in deciding that Apple is your at the same time your enabler, because it's giving you the device to communicate and to store the data and so on and so forth, but also the company behind the security of that device and that data at the same time. It's a big choice. And it also put the vendor, we are talking about Apple in this case, but could be whatever, in a difficult position when you talk about um, very important people, right? What if we had similar situations in the past with a terrorist using an iPhone? Okay, should Apple protect his customer, whoever it is? In that case, maybe it was a little, more controversial. Or in this case, should Apple protect like a politician or a very important people from a country that is not the same or where the vendor is based. Again, we are talking about Apple and United States in this case, but what about, I don't know, if it was Samsung, which is Korean, I think, right?
Yes.
And an opposite country, right, where a politician is using an Android from Samsung, and that device is compromised.
Right.
Should the Korean vendor protect the person from the other country? Should the company get in trouble with its own country and state because of this? So what's the position? Like, again, this is very, I believe, political, right?
It is.
And this is
Yes.
very difficult. But for vendors that are also putting a lot of their, I would say, branding in the security of their devices, this is actually a thing. This is actually a topic, right? Apple decided in the past to um, prioritize security no matter what, no matter who is the customer. If you are my customer, I support you 100%, and I will go against, I don't know, anyone that will pretend something else. And it appears it's still doing this based on
Yeah.
what we know from this news, right?
I mean, every case is very specific. So some of those you mentioned are complicated to tackle now. But as a general rule, I do believe we should expect vendors and companies to provide a good, if not high level of security. And this is a conversation that exists, but I think the concrete implications of this we're going to see a lot in the upcoming years. Um, Maybe just to share something from my work related space, the European Union is working a lot on this, and
Mm.
we'll hopefully see it in the next couple of years with the Resilience Act, which is the attempt to put a lot more pressure on companies to take up these issues and fix vulnerabilities to a reasonable level. So to identify who is responsible and what terms to do this, and say you cannot just either ignore the problem or claim that there is not, you can't do enough about it. We expect better from you. So I think we'll see a lot more from this. There are a lot of conversations, honestly, worldwide on this, whether it's the US, Europe, or even Asia. And this is gonna change just because the status quo right now it's bad, right? We have seen the numbers, we've seen the number of vulnerabilities, and this should not be, maybe it's a side effect of this field, but at least it should not be what we expect. We expect better, like we did in any other sector. Like if you are talking about aviation, if you're talking about automobile security, nobody today would argue that an unsecure plane is okay, even though that's extremely difficult, or it was extremely difficult to achieve, right? So I'm not saying that tomorrow this is going to change, or it is easy to tackle, but we should at least do more in this space, because
And
the vulnerability.
what you said is actually very, very interesting. And I want to expand a little more, right? You mentioned like the automotive and, aviation and so on and so forth. So what about, like, I'm speculating on a potential consequence of this kind of news, right? So we heard before when a country try to pushes for internal technologies versus foreign technologies, right?
Hmm.
Something like we will use our own network infrastructure from our own vendors because we don't trust foreign companies to be in the middle of our communications, or we want our own internet, so we don't want to use foreign social media because their countries can actually um, eavesdrop the communication. They can force the companies maybe to drop data and so on and so forth. So what about the consequence of this news is that suddenly Russia decides that, okay, no more foreign mobile devices from now on. Okay, because it's a risk. We don't know if Apple was behind it, but anyway, it was too much of a risk. So we start to building our own mobile devices and force our, I don't know, again, government people to just use our Russian mobile devices. And if we consider something like that, should we expand this to something else? Like, we know that automotive is so highly connected today. Should they start, building their own
Right.
Russian, cars just because they don't trust I don't know what they use, Mercedes
Yeah.
or whatsoever, or oh, okay, I'm not going to use a Boeing anymore. I'm not going to fly on a Boeing because this is not a Russian company, so they could eavesdrop my communication when I connect uh, to the flight Wi-Fi or something.
Yeah.
I could potentially talk about this forever.
Right, right. No, totally. Super interesting question. We need a different episode for this, but it comes down to like the risk equation we were talking about before. Because if you go that route, the assumption is that you can build something that is more secure. And that's a big assumption, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if you are a large country of that size, you can, but most other countries probably cannot. I mean, if we look at the state of the global economy today, that's not how it works, and maybe there are good reasons for it because you can be specialized in something and know nothing about something else, but then you take that knowledge and you use it. So that's one consideration, and then the other side of the risk equation is um, there are indeed some inherited built-in vulnerabilities that will always be there because of the complexity of the systems, like you were saying. So it comes down to like, okay, what are you prioritizing? What do you think is the biggest risk? And I think different people would argue for both sides to be more secure or more insecure, right? So if the case you took, Russia decided to just use Russian phones, I think that could be the reaction could be positive or negative depending on who you're talking to, right? And the assumption is, are those phones more secure? Yes or no? And what do we know? What can we do if they are more or less secure? But it's a really complicated topic because it's not it's not linear, right? It's not that someone sits down and says, okay, tomorrow we do this because this is the best
Mhm.
idea ever. It involves so many components of this field uh, that it's highly complicated to solve.
Yeah, and
And
that's
maybe you don't
actually,
solve it, you just manage it. That's another maybe interesting concept to close on in this space. You don't solve security, you just have to manage it over time.
yeah, yeah, and I think what you just said is actually the reason why this is going to be a wrap for today, and we're no we will stop trying to answer those questions because we had a lot of
Yeah.
very big, like, great questions, and with great questions comes no answers, as
Yeah.
we said before. So you know what, um, Christian, it has been a lovely chat with you. I'm not joking. This has been great, and so many, you know, tough processes, right? Something that I still need to think about and brainstorming with it. And of course, I will really love to have you back to this podcast again in one of the next episodes. So I will, you know, push you a little bit more in the next weeks and months. Hopefully, you will join again. And yeah, thanks again very much because I really appreciated it. Hope
Indeed,
you
it
as well.
was it was really fun conversation. I enjoyed the exchange. Thanks a lot for the invite, and thanks everybody who listened in. And like Georgia said at the beginning, I feel we are both, in a way, nerds of this space. So if you ever want to reach out and talk more about any of these, it would be a pleasure.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's definitely the purpose of all of this format. And just a little reminder: we are live on Twitch. We are, pretty much often live on Twitch as of now every week. But every episode is gonna be re-uploaded on YouTube and the audio version on Spotify and similar um, platforms. And we are always in search for new guests that want to join us in our discussions and chats. And any help, any feedback that you could provide during the lives, as comments in the behind the YouTube videos, or just directly reaching out to any of us. So please feel free to do that. That will be very appreciated. And with this, I will just hope to see you, both you, Christian, and people watching this on the next episode. So thank you very much, all, and
Thanks, everybody.
have a great night and
Thanks,
day and
Georgia.
week. Bye, bye, everyone.
Bye bye.